High upon the misty peaks of Mount Olympus, clouds drift like silver rivers, and the voice of Zeus echoes softly across the sky. It is not the sharp voice of thunder striking the earth, but a deeper sound that reminds both gods and mortals of truths older than time itself. In the world of ancient Greece, promises were never ordinary words spoken in passing, but sacred bonds woven with light, trust, and eternal destiny. At the very heart of this belief stood Zeus, ruler of heaven and earth, protector of justice, and eternal guardian of sacred oaths. When a vow was spoken, whether by a god seated among the stars or a mortal standing humbly by the hearth, it was Zeus who listened. And when an oath was sworn upon the river Styx, its power became unbreakable, echoing with divine weight through eternity itself. Tonight, we begin a journey into the Sacred Oath of Zeus, not a tale of war or conquest, but of truth, trust, and the ties that silently bind all living beings. So, let us walk into the timeless halls of Olympus and discover why every promise carried the infinite weight of the sky itself. High above the mortal world, where the sky touches the stars, rises Mount Olympus, a mountain unlike any other, crowned with snow and cloaked in shifting mist. To mortals, Olympus was never just stone and ice. It was a living symbol of mystery, power, and divine presence that shaped the destiny of the earth below. Legends told of lightning flashing from its summit, voices carried down on the wind, and decisions made above the clouds that changed the world forever. At the heart of this sacred realm stood Zeus, father of gods and men, ruler of the heavens, seated upon his throne of storm and sky. His throne was not of gold or silver, for his power was never born from wealth, but from the endless force of clouds, dawnlight, and thunder. In his hand he held no sword or spear, but the scepter of justice and the bolt of lightning, symbols not of conquest, but of order, balance, and truth. Zeus was not only king of Olympus, he was protector of law, guardian of promises, and eternal keeper of sacred oaths spoken by gods and mortals alike. Every god knew his throne was more than a seat of power. It was a beacon of truth, where the invisible bonds of honor were tied and safeguarded. When the gods gathered in Olympus, their voices clashed with rivalries and desires. Yet the steady presence of Zeus held the heavens in harmony. He listened, he judged, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of eternity, calming the storm and anchoring the order of creation. Mortals, too, revered Zeus. In Athens, Thebes, Sparta, and beyond, they raised temples, not to flatter him, but to honor the sacred balance he protected. For Zeus was not only lord of thunder and rain, he was guardian of trust, hearing every vow whispered beneath the stars by kings, shepherds, and wanderers. When a man swore loyalty to a brother, or a ruler promised fairness, or a traveler pledged kindness, their words rose like smoke to Olympus. From his throne, Zeus listened. His seat was not only majesty, but a place where the soul of the world was heard in every sacred promise made. Every vow, great or small, shaped the harmony of existence, proving that trust was the foundation of life, a bond stronger than stone or stars. So when we speak of the Sacred Oath of Zeus, we begin here, at his throne, where every true word carried the infinite weight of the sky. And here, at the heart of heaven, our journey into the story of Zeus and his sacred oath truly begins. In the ancient world, words carried more weight than stone, for a promise was not sound alone, but a thread woven into the very fabric of life. To the Greeks, an oath was sacred, a bond that called upon the gods themselves as witnesses to the truth spoken with heart and spirit. Above all, it was Zeus who listened most closely, guarding every word, every vow, as protector of justice and keeper of truth. Every oath carried power, not born of fear, but of trust, for trust-bound families gave strength to kings and held friends together. And trust, once broken, could not easily be restored, which is why an oath became more than a promise. It was a covenant of the heart. Picture a farmer vowing to share water with his neighbor. or a sailor pledging to return his crew safely, or a ruler promising fairness to his people. Such words, though simple, became sacred once spoken, rising beyond the earth and carried to the throne of Zeus upon the clouds of Olympus. To him, an oath was not mere speech, it was the heartbeat of justice, the rhythm of order shaping the world and its harmony. Even the gods were bound by oaths, their words echoing through eternity. For to swear falsely was to fracture the balance of the cosmos. The mightiest vows were sworn upon the river Styx, a boundary of worlds, where every promise became eternal and unbreakable. No god dared break a Styx oath, for it would unravel the trust that bound Olympus together and kept the heavens in order. Mortals, too, felt this weight when they raised hands in temples, their words carried upward to Zeus, the divine witness of every vow. Oaths shaped their lives in ways seen and unseen, reminding them that honesty is the root of friendship and justice, the heart of community. Without oaths, words would lose meaning, bonds would crumble, and the world would fall into chaos, stripped of trust and harmony. But with oaths, families found safety, rulers gained accountability, and neighbors lived side by side in lasting peace. For the Greeks, the oath was a bridge between mortal frailty and divine order, a way to touch eternity through sincerity. Every vow whispered beneath the stars was a reminder of Zeus, listening, watching, holding the world together through the strength of truth. Thus, the meaning of oaths was never small, but the very breath of harmony, keeping the universe whole and life bound by trust. And in guarding the oath, Zeus guarded not only Olympus, but the very heart of existence itself. Far beneath Olympus, deeper than the roots of the earth, there lies a river unlike any other, flowing in silence and eternal mystery. Its waters do not sparkle in sunlight or carry songs of life, but move dark and unseen, feared not for harm, but for their unshakable power. This is the river Styx, a boundary between worlds, separating the living from the unseen, keeper of promises and guardian of truth. When the gods swore upon the Styx, their vows became eternal, sealed with cosmic weight that bound even immortals to their word. The Styx was not merely water, but a witness, a sacred force that could not be deceived or denied, holding every oath in eternity. Zeus declared the Styx the holiest of rivers, for no vow sworn upon it could be broken without shaking the harmony of existence. To betray such truth was not punishment but consequence, for falsehood cracked the very order of the universe and the balance of trust. In the halls of Olympus, when debate filled the air, silence fell as soon as a god swore upon the Styx, for eternity had entered the room. An oath on the Styx was no longer words, it was law, binding with a force stronger than iron, shaping destiny for gods and mortals. Even the mightiest gods, Apollo, Athena, Hera, Hermes, felt its gravity, never swearing lightly, for the Styx bound them tighter than chains. Mortals, though they never saw the Styx, believed in its power, speaking of it with reverence as the unseen foundation of justice. A farmer's vow, a ruler's pledge, a friend's promise, each echoed the sacred spirit of the Styx, watched and honored by Zeus above. Stories told of Hera swearing her loyalty to Olympus upon the Styx, her words standing forever as a pillar of heaven's order. Apollo, too, invoked the Styx, vowing that his oracles would never lie, binding prophecy itself to the eternal truth of the river. Through these tales, gods and mortals learned that promises spoken with sincerity could carry the strength of eternity and shape the world. At the heart of this sacred law stood Zeus, not wielding the Styx as a weapon, but honoring it as the holiest witness of truth. Through the Styx, he showed that vows, divine or mortal, held the power to uphold harmony, trust, and the balance of the cosmos. The Styx was never darkness alone. It was the reflection of eternal light, a river that reminded all beings that truth cannot die. And in its waters, silent and eternal, the sacred oath of Zeus found its most unbreakable form, shining through eternity. In the golden dawn of Olympus, the gods shaped their new world with skies of light, fertile earth, and seas singing of eternity. Yet even in harmony, there was uncertainty. For each god carried desires and visions of how the world should unfold. Where power exists, trust must follow. For Zeus knew thrones and thunderbolts were not enough to secure peace. Words needed weight, promises needed to endure, and harmony could not rest on pride or rivalry alone. So Zeus turned to the oath, a bond stronger than ambition, a promise sealed in eternity. The river Styx, silent and eternal, was chosen as witness, keeper of truth, and guardian of divine law. The first oaths were not spoken lightly, but carved into the fabric of the world as sacred vows. Hera, queen of heavens, swore to guard marriage and family, believing unity begins at home. Apollo, radiant with light, vowed that his oracles would never lie, truth binding every word. Athena, wise and calm, swore that knowledge would serve justice, clarity, and wisdom for all. Poseidon pledged his waters would nourish and challenge life, shaping mortals without malice. Hermes, swift and clever, promised that every message carried would remain faithful and true. Each vow, sworn upon the Styx, became the foundation of Olympus, freely given in honor. The gods felt eternity in their words, knowing the Styx could not be deceived or forgotten. Breaking an oath brought not Zeus's wrath, but the universe itself, revealing the truth. This made them careful, speaking only vows they could uphold, mindful of eternity's witness. Through these oaths, unity bloomed among the gods, trust binding their diverse powers and purposes. Mortals, hearing the stories, learned that even immortals held themselves to truth and loyalty. A shepherd repeated Apollo's vow beneath the stars, trusting light to guide his path. A craftsman remembered Athena's promise, working with patience and justice in his hands. A sailor honored Poseidon's pledge, praying for both challenge and blessing upon the waves. The oaths of Olympus flowed downward like light through clouds, shaping mortal culture and belief. Through them, humans learned the sacredness of promises, and gods shared a bond beyond fear. Zeus stood not as enforcer but guardian, shepherding truth and preserving divine trust. Over time, these oaths became stories. Stories turned to traditions, passed across generations. They reminded all that words, once spoken sincerely, hold weight greater than stone. The first oaths on the Styx were more than promises. They were the birth of trust, woven like unseen thread. They held Olympus together, radiant with the sacred oath of Zeus. Among the first oaths on Olympus was that of Hera, queen of the heavens and consort of Zeus. Hera was goddess of majesty and pride, but also of family, marriage, and unity. She knew that even the brightest kingdoms could fall if bonds of trust were broken. When Zeus called the gods to swear upon the Styx, Hera stepped forward with dignity. Her voice carried through Olympus as she vowed to guard the sanctity of marriage. She swore to uphold loyalty, to protect families, and to preserve harmony. It was not an oath of control, but of guardianship, born from wisdom and care. Hera believed that love and trust were roots from which all harmony would grow. Without them, even Olympus itself would falter beneath its shining throne. The gods listened in silence, for Hera's words touched the essence of unity. Her oath was not for herself, but for every bond that linked gods and mortals. To Hera, a promise was not fleeting words, but threads weaving lives together. Once sworn upon the Styx, her vow became eternal and unshakable. From then, Hera was not only queen, but guardian of loyalty itself. Mortals turned to her in reverence, praying for faithful hearts and lasting bonds. In her temples, offerings were made for harmony between spouses and families. Couples invoked her name at unions, seeking her blessing for strong promises. It was said her presence lingered quietly among loyal hearts, unseen but real. When loyalty faltered, mortals remembered Hera's vow and renewed their faithfulness. Her oath taught that loyalty was not a chain but a choice of devotion. It was the decision to stand firm, even when storms or trials appeared. Zeus honored Hera's vow, knowing his rule meant little without true trust. In her oath, he saw the sacred strength of promises kept forever. Thus, Hera's vow became part of Olympus, binding gods and mortals alike. Greeks carried her oath quietly in life, through family, work, and community. Parents teaching children, friends standing together, All echoed Hera's promise. Her sacred oath showed bonds were not fragile but unbreakable when tied with truth. Her strength was not thunder or lightning, but quiet endurance and patience. It was loyalty that sustained families, friendships, and communities through hardship. Through Hera, mortals learned that loyalty required care and constant renewal, and they saw that Zeus honored such devotion as sacred and eternal. Songs and poems told of her vow, shining before the river Styx. Her words echoed like flame, her oath carried into eternity. Generations passed, yet her story remained a guiding light of loyalty. It whispered to mortals in doubt, reminding them, true devotion endures. For Hera had sworn upon the Styx, and her vow became eternal. In that eternity, the sacred oath of Zeus embraced love, trust, and unity. A deep rumble echoed across Olympus, the sound of waves rising like thunder from the depths. It was Poseidon, god of the sea, whose trident gleamed like captured lightning. He stepped forward, each stride carrying the force of crashing tides and endless waters. Brother to Zeus and Hera, his domain was vast, wilder than any other realm. The sea was boundless, filled with both beauty and terror, mystery and danger. He understood the gravity of an oath sworn before the sacred Styx. For rivers and oceans were kin, children of the same primordial waters. Silence fell as Poseidon raised his trident, the symbol of storms and dominion. My oath, he declared, his voice rolling like waves on the horizon, is to the sea. He swore the waters would never betray the gods, but remain their eternal ally. He vowed safe passage for sailors who honored the gods with devotion. He promised oceans would yield gifts to mortals who respected their depths, but his wrath would fall upon those who defied the divine with arrogance. Storms would rise, ships would shatter, and waves would swallow the proud whole. His oath was both blessing and warning, gift and punishment woven together. The seas became mirrors of justice, reflecting loyalty or betrayal without mercy. The Styx bore witness, sealing his vow in eternal, unbreakable truth. Power rippled outward like tides, binding every ocean, river, and shore. From that day, the seas were no longer his alone, but part of Olympus. Mortals felt the weight of his promise in every tide and every storm. Fishermen prayed at dawn, trusting the sea had ears for their whispers. Sailors carried offerings aboard, seeking the watchful eye of his trident. When storms gathered, they prayed for mercy instead of cursing the winds. His oath became rhythm itself, constant as waves rising and falling with time. The sea was merciless, yet just, punishing arrogance while rewarding devotion. Poets sang of him as both destroyer and savior, chaos and balance. To live by the sea was to honor the covenant sworn upon the Styx. Even the gods recognized the strength of Poseidon's vow of waters. Zeus nodded, for without the sea, no harvests or journeys could endure. Hera honored his words, for family and loyalty thrived on the sea's gifts. Athena saw his balance of justice, wisdom, woven through storm and calm. Apollo heard in his vow the rhythm of waves like an eternal song. So his oath became part of the chorus of vows sworn that day. Each promise different, yet together weaving Olympus into sacred unity. His vow lived on in waves, storms and tides touching every shore. It whispered in calm waters, thundered in hurricanes, eternal and alive. Mortals built temples upon coasts, raising statues with tridents above harbors. Before voyages, they cast offerings into the sea as sacred gifts. Every ritual reminded them the sea was bound by divine promise. For Poseidon had sworn before the Styx, and such vows cannot break. His oath shaped the seas and the lives of all who sailed them. Through it, the sacred oath of Zeus grew stronger, binding heaven, earth, and sea. One seat on Olympus remained in shadow, waiting for its master. From beneath the earth, silence stirred, deeper than oceans, darker than night. Hades, ruler of the underworld, arrived unseen, yet undeniable in presence. Though rarely seated among the Olympians, his authority was unshaken. His realm was essential, a place of rest, judgment, and renewal. As he appeared, the light of Olympus dimmed, not from malice, but gravity. The gods turned, curious, as their brother stepped forward to speak. Unlike Poseidon's thunder or Hera's majesty, Hades held quiet strength. He carried no weapon, only a scepter, a symbol of finality. His voice was calm, steady, echoing with the weight of eternity. "My oath," he said, "is to the unseen, to life and death's balance." He vowed every soul would find fairness in his realm. No king, beggar, hero, or child would be beyond justice. The underworld, he promised, would remain pure, untainted by corruption. In death, masks would fall away, leaving only essence behind. He swore to guard this balance, keeping the cycle unbroken. His vow sealed the gates against chaos and twisted destiny. He promised memory would endure where Lethe should not erase. The Styx bore witness, binding his words in eternal truth. His oath was firm, rooted in existence, unyielding as stone. Mortals felt this vow in quiet ways, unspoken but real. When burying loved ones, they prayed for Hades' fairness. They revered him not in fear, but in respect for peace. Offerings were laid at tombs, crossroads, and places between worlds. Death was not cruelty, but passage, a bridge he guarded. Poets sang softly of him, his name spoken with care. His oath was silence, unbroken, carrying power beyond thunder. Even gods respected his vow, knowing its sacred strength. Athena nodded, for wisdom needed endings to hold meaning. Demeter bowed, recalling her bond and rivalry with him. Zeus honored Hades, for skies rested upon firm foundations. Hades' vow was not glory, but order and quiet truth. He taught that promises could be whispers, not thunderclaps. Some were kept in shadows, through patience and time. His oath reminded all that eternity dwelt below as well. Every journey found its close within his realm of balance. Through him, the cycle remained sacred and unbroken. Mortals found comfort, trusting his impartial eyes for justice. Their prayers at funerals were calls for fairness and peace. In gratitude, they honored his silent, steady guardianship. His oath joined Hera's, Poseidon's, and the others, weaving strength. The sacred oath of Zeus grew as each vow was spoken. In Hades' promise, gods found balance. Mortals found hope. His oath was shadow and silence, yet stronger than thunder, for he swore upon the Styx, eternal and unbreakable. Through him, Olympus's covenant reached the roots of existence. As the ages passed, the oath sworn upon Olympus did not fade. Though gods and mortals walked apart, they were bound by promises of old. The sacred oath of Zeus was etched, not in stone, but in life itself. It lived in the rising sun, faithful in its return each dawn. It whispered in the tides, shaped by Poseidon's eternal command. It lingered in the stillness of graves, guarded by Hades' steady hand. It burned in the hearths of homes, blessed by Hestia's gentle flame. It moved in storms, harvests, and lullabies sung to mortal children. For an oath sworn by gods was never mere words, it became a living force. Mortals sensed its weight when they gazed upon the heavens. Kings echoed Zeus when they swore oaths upon their thrones. Warriors fought not just in might, but in memory of divine vows. Farmers prayed to the seasons, trusting in balance and return. Poets and seers told of the covenant in verses that never faded. Even when mortals faltered, the oath of the gods remained steadfast. It was not a contract, but a bond, guiding both mortals and immortals. The legacy of the oath stretched far beyond Olympus's peaks. It became law in nature, balance in justice, rhythm in time itself. Every promise mortals made reflected the first vow of Olympus. The oath taught that words could bind destinies and carry truth. It showed that promises were not for glory, but for trust and balance. Through storm and fire, through triumph and despair, the vow endured. The gods' promises wove together, forming a fabric too strong to break. Mortals saw Olympus in the night sky, guardians keeping their vow. The oath was alive in truth, in loyalty, in the keeping of words. It lived when sailors trusted stars, when families lit their hearths. It endured when elders told children stories by the lamplight. Nations rose and fell, yet the covenant whispered through it all. The gods' vows reached into every mortal breath. unseen but present. Both mortals and gods shared the unbroken chain of promise. The sacred oath of Zeus was more than a vow. It was a living flame. It was Olympus's gift, reminding that truth, once spoken, must endure. The oath continued timeless, echoing across heaven and earth. It whispered to all who listened, promises are sacred, and truth lives forever. Time flowed endlessly, becoming the true judge of the gods' vow. For what is an oath, if not tested by the passing weight of ages? The sacred oath of Zeus was destined to face its trials. The test came not in war or strife, but in the quiet currents of life. Mortals, with fleeting years, sometimes doubted the unseen promises. When storms ruined, crops or illness spread, whispers filled their villages. "Have the gods forgotten their oath?" they asked, gazing upward. Yet others believed the vow still lived, hidden in destiny's rhythm. From Olympus, the gods watched, their silence heavy with thought. Zeus, with storm-filled eyes, saw how faith could falter in doubt. He called once more the assembly of the gods to order. Olympus rang with voices, Poseidon's waves, Hera's loyalty, Athena's wisdom. Each was asked, "Do you still guard the oath's eternal flame?" Poseidon swore the seas would cradle ships and shape coasts. Hades promised the balance between life and death would remain. Demeter vowed to steady the cycles of growth and harvest. Apollo reminded that even shadows serve the light of truth. Artemis swore to protect the wilds and guide hunters fairly. Hestia promised the hearth's flame would never cease to burn. Zeus thundered softly, "The oath is not mine alone, but ours. For promises endure only if each voice continues to sustain them." The gods renewed their vow, their words falling like gentle rain. Mortals felt it in calm skies. In spring, after winter's chill, they sensed it in justice restored, in hope that quietly returned. The oath was never about breaking, but enduring through doubt. True promises are tested in moments when faith grows weak. As mortals worked, sang, and prayed, whispers of doubt faded. The gods had spoken, the oath still lived, strong and eternal. Its trial was endured, not by thunder, but by many voices. The oath was not a chain, but a living bond of trust. Each time it was honored, it grew stronger in time's fabric. And so the story of the oath deepened, rooted in eternity, unyielding, timeless, alive. The sacred oath of Zeus endured forever. The sacred oath of Zeus had withstood doubt, time, and trials of faith. Yet the gods knew the oath would endure only if mortals remembered it. What is a vow if it fades into silence, like smoke in the wind? So the gods gave mortals the gift of remembrance, born from Olympus. It was not carved in stone, nor thundered aloud, but lived in stories. Poets carried it in verses, their words echoing the promise of the gods. Priests spoke of it in temples, their voices rising with incense smoke. Farmers told children the turning seasons proved the gods kept faith. Sailors raised hands to the stars, guided by the oath's unseen light. Hestia's hearth fire glowed in every home, a living sign of memory. The gift of remembrance was no scroll of laws, but a living presence. The gods knew mortals needed signs to anchor their fragile faith. So they scattered reminders across the earth and the sky. Zeus's lightning flashed, not in wrath, but as a beacon of promise kept. Athena gave wisdom to rulers, so justice itself spoke of the oath. Demeter filled fields and granaries, her harvest proof of fidelity. Apollo inspired poets, whose songs carried memory across generations. Artemis guided hunters, her arrows true and her fairness steadfast. Poseidon's seas, calm or storming, echoed the oath's eternal rhythm. Hades kept his realm balanced. Even in death, promises held weight. These reminders wove the oath into daily life, unseen yet near. Each sunrise became a symbol of faith kept and renewed. Each prayer offered became a thread in the oath's great fabric. Every act of honesty, loyalty, and justice echoed Olympus's vow. Mortals carried the memory without always knowing its source. A mother's promise to her child reflected the god's eternal vow. A friend's loyalty mirrored the oath sworn upon Olympus. A leader's pledge of fairness was born of divine remembrance. In this way, memory became the true guardian of the oath, for it could not fade while mortals lived by its spirit. Temples might crumble, empires might fall, but the memory remained, and Zeus, watching from Olympus, was content with its endurance. The oath was preserved not just in divine voices, but mortal lives. Remembrance became the bridge between heaven and earth itself. It kept the oath alive as both story of the past and flame of the future. An eternal voice whispering, "Promises are sacred, truth must not fade." The sacred oath of Zeus had been preserved through remembrance, carried by gods and mortals alike. But what is an oath if not constantly renewed, like a flame that must be tended? Even the strongest promises fade, if left unattended, like fire without fuel. Thus began what mortals later called the Eternal Watch, a covenant of faith and balance. From Olympus, Zeus gazed down at the world, watching lives unfold under his vow. He saw children born beneath the dawn, carrying hope into a world bound by promise. He saw travelers setting forth across seas and mountains, guided by unseen order. He saw rulers making choices that would shape the fate of generations to come. To Zeus, the oath was never about glory, but about balance and harmony. Balance kept the seasons turning, the stars shining, and worlds intertwined. And so, the Eternal Watch was born, a thread binding heaven to earth each day. At dawn, Helios drove his chariot across the sky, renewing the vow of Olympus. At dusk, Nyx spread her cloak of night, and the stars whispered of fidelity. The rhythm of nature itself became a living covenant between gods and mortals. But the gods did not leave the burden of the oath to nature alone. Athena stood watch over wisdom and justice, guiding mortals to remember fairness. Apollo carried memory through prophecy and song, keeping truth alive in verse. Demeter filled granaries with her harvest, reminding mortals of trust and care. Poseidon stirred the seas, blessing and testing sailors with lessons of reverence. Artemis walked in forests, guiding hunters who honored restraint and fairness. Even Hades, in silence, preserved balance between the living and the dead. The Eternal Watch was divine, but also mortal, carried by human promises. A shepherd's vow to guard his flock echoed the god's ancient oath. A craftsman's dedication to his work mirrored the faith of Olympus. A warrior's pledge to defend his people became part of the Eternal Watch. Through these acts, the sacred oath was renewed by faith and integrity. The gods could guard it, but mortals carried its flame forward each day. In time, whispers arose of unseen guardians watching in moments of doubt. Some said it was Zeus himself, his thunderous gaze stirring hearts to faith. Others believed it was the fates, weaving threads to keep the oath alive. Perhaps both were true, for the watch was not a figure, but a bond. It was a living covenant, unseen yet guiding, always present in spirit. Because of this bond, the oath did not weaken or fade into silence. It grew stronger with every sunrise, every act of trust, every voice of truth. Thus, the sacred oath endured as a living power, not a relic of the past. It bound gods and mortals, reminding all that promises must be cherished. An oath is like fire fed, guarded, and tended, or else it falters. But under the Eternal Watch, the flame of the oath would never fade. The Eternal Watch had preserved the sacred oath of Zeus for countless generations. Yet an oath is not tested by words alone, but by silence, when faith is unseen. Mortals grew weary, distracted by kingdoms, wars, and the noise of ambition. Sacred stories faded. Hidden in temples, few still entered with reverence. Priests spoke, but their voices echoed into nearly empty halls of stone. Poets sang of Olympus, yet their songs competed with tales of conquest. Even the gods felt the quiet weight of dwindling devotion on Olympus. Zeus looked down and saw fewer prayers rising like smoke to the heavens. Athena felt minds turn from justice toward cunning and selfish gain. Apollo's lyre grew softer, as fewer voices joined him in harmony. Demeter's harvests still came, yet gratitude waned, replaced by entitlement. The Eternal Watch had not ended, but it had grown fragile, stretched thin. This was the trial of silence, not war, not calamity, but absence. What happens to an oath when no one speaks of it? when memory fades. Can a promise survive if hearts no longer carry its story of truth? Zeus pondered deeply, knowing the oath was eternal, yet fragile in faith. He chose not to thunder, but to trust the resilience of mortal hearts. Even in silence, seeds of faith remained, waiting for light to bloom. In hidden places, the oath endured, carried by quiet and humble acts. A mother whispered divine stories to her child beneath the night sky. A farmer offered first grain of harvest to Demeter in gratitude. A sailor alone at sea lifted prayer to Poseidon amid raging storms. A hunter whispered Artemis's name before loosing an arrow in reverence. These sparks in darkness were fragile, yet they kept the flame alive. Slowly the sparks grew brighter, breaking silence with renewed devotion. A poet, stirred by a dream, wrote verses of Zeus's eternal vow. A priest rekindled a fire in an abandoned temple, and people gathered. A ruler, guided by Athena's wisdom, chose justice instead of conquest. Through these awakenings, silence broke, and memory returned to hearts. The trial of silence proved a truth beyond thunder or fire's roar. The oath did not need noise or display, but lived in whispers. It endured in secret prayers, small acts, and quiet devotion unseen. As long as a few carried it within, the sacred oath survived. Zeus, watching, was content, for silence had not destroyed the oath. It purified faith, leaving only what was true to endure the stillness. Habit faded, yet devotion rooted deeply grew strong and unshaken. Thus, the trial of silence became part of the eternal watch's story, a reminder that even when voices are few, the sacred flame burns. The oath of Zeus is bound not by sound, but by unyielding truth, and truth, once sworn, can never be silenced by absence or time. The trial of silence had shown the gods that even in stillness, the sacred oath of Zeus endured. It survived not through thunder or spectacle, but through whispers and hidden sparks of faith. Yet Zeus knew that silence could always return, and with it, forgetfulness. He sought to give mortals something enduring, a gift that renewed the oath across ages. It was not an artifact of gold, for such treasures decay with time. It was not a law carved into stone, for words fade into dust. Instead, Zeus chose something living, woven into the rhythm of existence itself. He gave mortals the gift of renewal, a promise written in cycles of life. It was dawn after night, spring after winter, calm after storm. It reminded mortals they could always begin again, even after straying. It whispered that broken promises could be mended with truth. The gods carried this gift into mortal lives in countless ways. Demeter renewed the earth, bringing harvest after winter's cold. Apollo renewed inspiration, filling poets with song after silence. Athena renewed wisdom, guiding rulers to justice after mistakes. Poseidon renewed courage, calming seas so sailors could trust again. Artemis renewed strength, teaching hunters patience after folly. Even Hades renewed balance, showing endings as new beginnings. The cycle of renewal became the heartbeat of the oath. Each sunrise was more than light, it was a promise kept. Each spring bloom was proof that faith endured the cold. Each calm sea and fair harvest echoed the rhythm of hope. Mortals began to see renewal in their own lives each day. A farmer who lost crops found hope in the next sowing. A mother who faltered in patience tried again with love. A leader who strayed from justice sought forgiveness and corrected course. Even the smallest attempts to begin again became part of the oath. The gift of renewal spread quietly, not as law, but as comfort. It told mortals they were not bound by failure, but by growth. It taught that the oath was flexible, bending but unbroken, so even when silence returned, renewal rekindled faith once more. Zeus, watching from Olympus, was content with what he saw. In renewal, he had given mortals resilience against silence. The dawn always followed night, and spring always came after winter. No silence or failure could ever destroy the spirit of the oath. The sacred oath became more than a vow, it became a living rhythm. It was written not on stone, but in sky, sea, soil, and stars. The gift of renewal bound mortals to gods through hope, not fear. And in that hope, The oath grew stronger and unshaken. Thus the story of the oath deepened with new meaning, not only preserved by memory, nor only guarded by silence, but renewed by life itself, again and again, for all ages. And with this renewal, the sacred oath of Zeus shone brighter forever. The gift of renewal had given mortals hope, but Zeus knew the sacred oath must be guarded. For what is renewed can still be broken, and what is fragile must be tended with care. Thus he called upon the gods to share not only their gifts, but also their eternal watch. On Olympus, a council was held beneath a sky bright with endless clarity. The gods gathered, their faces solemn, reflecting the weight of eternity on their shoulders. Each had offered renewal, but each also carried the duty of guarding the oath. This was not a task for Zeus alone, but for all who had sworn themselves to it. Athena spoke first, her voice clear and sharp as wisdom itself. "The oath is more than words," she said. "It is the foundation of justice for mortals and gods. I will watch over councils and laws, ensuring fairness that honors the oath we keep." Poseidon, restless as the waves, rose with the roar of the sea. "I will guard the oath in waters, where no sailor forgets the bond of gods and mortals. When storms rise, they will recall the strength of the promise that holds the world steady." Artemis, veiled in silver light, lifted her gaze with quiet resolve. "I will keep watch in the wild, where mortals are humbled by forest and sky. In the silence of the hunt, in the stillness of nature, they will hear the oath's whisper." Apollo, radiant as the sun, spoke with warmth steady and bright. "I will guard the oath in prophecy and song, carrying truth through music and light." Demeter, patient as the earth, gave her vow with gentle strength. "I will keep the oath in fields and seed, where every harvest reminds mortals of faith." Even Hades, shadowed yet steady, pledged his own guardianship. "I will guard the oath in endings, showing that death itself is a passage, not defeat." The council grew quiet, as each vow lingered in the sacred air. Finally, Zeus stood, his presence a harmony of storm and sky above all. "I will guard the oath in the hearts of mortals, where its truest power lies hidden. For temples may fall and treasures fade, but choice endures within the soul." With this, the eternal watch was set. Each god, a guardian of the vow. The heavens, seas, forests, songs, fields, and even the underworld carried its flame. Mortals soon felt the watch upon their lives in countless unseen moments. A ruler hesitated before injustice, sensing Athena's eyes steady upon him. A sailor prayed in stormy seas, feeling Poseidon's strength hold back despair. A hunter paused in the woods, hearing Artemis in the rustling of the trees. A poet, struck with sudden vision, knew Apollo's hand had guided their song. A farmer planting seed gave thanks for Demeter's patience in cycles of growth. And even the grieving found peace in Hades' reminder that endings lead to renewal. The eternal watch was no burden but a comfort to mortal hearts. They knew they were never alone in keeping the promise between heaven and earth. The gods were not distant rulers, but silent guardians at each mortal step. The oath lived not in thunder, but in quiet choices, shaped by care. It was a weight both gentle and steady, an unseen bond across all realms. Zeus, watching from Olympus, found quiet contentment in what he saw. The oath, once thundered in promise, now lived in every corner of existence. It was renewed through cycles of life and guarded by the eternal watch of gods. The sacred oath of Zeus had become unbreakable not by fear, but by devotion. It endured not because it was forced, but because it was nurtured with care. And as long as mortals and gods remembered, it would shine timeless and unshaken. Thus, under the eternal watch, the sacred oath continued, stronger than ever before. The eternal watch was set, and mortals felt its weight in every choice. Yet Zeus knew no oath could last if it stayed only with the gods. The sacred oath was never meant to be distant, but alive in mortal hearts. So came the time for mortals themselves to carry it forward, not as a burden, but as a flame passed gently from God to human. Zeus gazed upon rulers, poets, farmers, sailors, and children. Each carried within them faith, hope, and the seed of truth. At dawn, Zeus whispered to winds and stars above, "Let the oath be written not just in heaven, but in mortal breath. Let it live not as law, but as choice renewed each day." So it was. Mortals began to feel the oath within themselves. A ruler, once greedy, turned to fairness, whispering, "I keep the oath." A weary farmer planted with patience, trusting the earth's rhythm. A child shared food in kindness, embodying the oath in simple grace. The oath no longer belonged to Zeus alone, it belonged to all. It lived not in thunder, but in daily acts of care and honesty. It echoed not only in temples, but in homes, fields, and songs. The gods watched with wonder as mortals embraced the vow. Athena smiled, seeing justice rise from wisdom of the people. Poseidon calmed the seas for sailors who sailed with trust. Apollo glowed as poetry and music wove the oath into memory. Artemis blessed hunters who honored the wild with reverence. Demeter rejoiced when harvests were shared in gratitude. Even Hades nodded, for endings embraced with dignity honored the oath. Zeus felt joy stir quietly within his heart. The oath had begun as thunder, as his personal vow of power. Now it was no longer his alone, it had become a covenant of all. It lived in cycles of renewal, in divine watch, in mortal choice. It was not fragile, carried by countless hearts in countless ways. The sky glowed brighter, woven with light of the oath. Waves whispered it. Trees rustled it. Stars reflected it in silence. Everywhere was a reminder. The oath was alive. So the sacred oath became more than a vow. It became a living truth, binding gods and mortals together. From that day, every sunrise spoke of renewal. Every just law reminded mortals of justice. Every song carried Apollo's vow in melody. Every harvest bore Demeter's blessing of earth. Every forest path whispered Artemis's guardianship. Every sea journey reflected Poseidon's strength and trust. Every ending honored Hades' promise of balance. The oath was no longer hidden in myth or temple. It lived in every breath, every choice, every act of faith. Zeus stood on Olympus, watching the tapestry unfold. The thunder in his heart was no storm, but gratitude. The oath had not only endured, it had blossomed. It was no longer just his promise, but the eternal heartbeat of life. And in that truth, the sacred oath of Zeus was complete. Not an ending, but a continuation carried through time. By gods, by mortals, by the eternal rhythm of renewal.